Morning, everybody. No surprise that Andrew Scheer comes out rejecting the use of the word genocide. Global News is reporting, quote, Andrew Scheer rejects use of genocide in reference to Indigenous women and girls. And we're going to actually just listen to his words here about a minute, and here we go.
And a lot of good work was done to suggest things that governments can do to protect society's most vulnerable. And so we are going to be proposing that. We've already come forward with some ideas about fighting human trafficking and tougher provisions in the criminal code for victims of domestic abuse. Those are things that have come out through the report that I think all levels of government should look at and see how best to implement. When you look at the term genocide and all that carries about, the scale, the involvement of the government with a view towards committing these types of atrocities, and the ramifications that follow. You know, the idea that Canada would now be subject to the types of international actions that follow findings of genocide. I think we have to be very careful with the use of that terminology, and I don't want to get distracted from the good work that the report has done. But that being said, I think that the tragedy is its own thing. It is its own heartbreaking situation for every single family that was affected by it, and that it does not follow into the category of genocide.
So, I mean, that was a long walk to get there, and he says it at the beginning as well, but not as robustly, so I wanted to look at it. So he doesn't want to use the term genocide, but he thinks the report had lots of good work. Fundamentally, that $92 million taxpayer-funded report was tasked with looking into what happened to the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and instead, it decided to declare a genocide. I don't think that was good work. I think that was politically motivated and ridiculous, and it didn't answer the fundamental question of what happened to those girls, who murdered them, and spoiler alert, from what I've read, it's 70% Indigenous men murdered them. So, I mean, of what we know, right? So this report is not good. And I just disagree with Andrew Scheer on a lot of things, and that's one of them, but not with rejecting the use of the term genocide. This missing and murdered Indigenous women report doesn't take into account the government's actions. I mean, if you compare it to other genocides, the government was the one driving the killing. The government was the one saying, these are the policies that are, I mean, look at South Africa right now, right? They're taking land from white property owners. That is potentially genocidal action. Look at genocide through history. Mao and Pol Pot and Hitler and Stalin, right? Mussolini. These people used the power of the state actively, in an active way. They actively engaged killing of their own citizens. It wasn't just like, oh, well, whatever happens, happens. You know, maybe we don't like the Jewish people, said Hitler, but, you know, live and let live. Oh, wait, no, that wasn't him. Right? So, like, this doesn't rise to genocide, and the report doesn't answer the question. Ridiculous. So, Maxime Bernier is tweeting, this is interesting news. This is really crazy. And changing topics now, Maxime Bernier tweets, quote, Tories are becoming so politically correct, they reject a high-profile Muslim candidate because his opposition to radical Islam, quote, will likely be portrayed by liberals and others as Islamophobic. You are welcome in our party, Professor, at Salim Mansur, LNC. And we're going to look at this. Mr. Bernier is responding to this tweet by Andrew Lawton from True North, I believe. And he says, Professor and author Salim Mansur barred from seeking conservative nomination over potential to be portrayed by liberals and others as Islamophobic. And we're going to read this article. Now, the funny part here is you'd think that you'd be able to parlay that into a strength. You say, wait a second, he's not Islamophobic. This man is Muslim, is part of well, we'll get there in a minute. Maybe I'll save my diatribe for after we know what's going on. Here's True North reporting, quote, award-seeking Professor Salim Mansur disqualified from seeking conservative nomination. Mansur, a devout Muslim, has been a stalwart opponent of radical Islam and the group's advancing it within Canada. Okay, so Professor, author, and columnist Salim Mansur has been disqualified from seeking the conservative nomination. Mansur, a recently retired Western University professor, announced his candidacy last September in his home riding London North Centre. Despite being told by Conservative Party of Canada regional organizer last November that he was allowed to launch his campaign and begin campaigning, Mansur received notice from the party's executive director Monday morning that his nomination candidacy was disallowed. The National Candidate Selection Committee of the Conservative Party of Canada has disallowed your candidacy as a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, said an email from Dustin Van Vutt. No reason was provided in the email, but Mansur told me in a brief interview that Conservative leader Andrew Scheer's campaign manager, Hamish Marshall, advised him last week that the party's concerns with Mansur's past writing and public speaking on Islam and the politics of radical Muslims, which Marshall said will likely be portrayed by liberals and others as Islamophobic and becoming disruptive to the party's national campaign. It's Mansur's academic career that has held him in such high esteem by the Conservatives in the past, however. Mansur has testified before Parliament on numerous occasions at the invitation of the Conservatives. In 2017, he was awarded the Canadian Senate's 150th anniversary medal for his work promoting interfaith understanding presented by Conservative Senator Linda Frum. Mansur, a devout Muslim, has been a stalwart opponent of radical Islam and the groups advancing it within Canada. He's chronicled this fight as a Muslim and as an academic in his best-selling book, Islam's Predicament: Perspectives of a Dissident Muslim. The retired professor said in an open letter on his website that his mission is to, quote, elect a conservative government in Ottawa with Andrew Scheer as our next prime minister. On his platform page, Mansur cites economic growth, strengthening Canada's security, and vigorously protecting individual freedoms as his priorities. In the interest of disclosure, I, being the author, Andrew Lawton, I, being Andrew Lawton, have introduced Mansur to a number of political activists in London as a personal favor and has served on a sounding board for some ideas he has had about his campaign. I've received no compensation for these or any other efforts related to his candidacy. I just want to be clear that there is some connection between the author of this piece and Salim Mansur. So I want you to know that because that's important. And it's important enough that the author wanted to note it, so I didn't want to skip over it. Okay, and here's Mr. Mansur's homepage, his website, and on the About page, I'll read it to you. It says, Salim Mansur is seeking the Conservative Party of Canada nomination in London North Centre for the 2019 federal election. He's a political science professor at the University of Western Ontario and the author of numerous books, including The Quran Problem and Islamism, 2017, Delectable Lie, A Liberal Repudiation of Multiculturalism, 2011, and Islam's Predicament: Perspectives of a Dissident Muslim, 2009. He's made a name for himself in Canada as a former syndicated columnist for the National Sun newspaper chain and also wrote for the Western Standard and National Post. His work has also appeared in the Globe and Mail, the Wall Street Journal, National Review Online, and the online journal for the Gatestone Institute, where he serves as a distinguished fellow. As a consistent and conservative voice on foreign affairs and other aspects of public policy, Salim has been called on to testify before the Canadian Parliament numerous times. He is an academic consultant for the Centre of Security Policy in Washington, D.C., and a member of the board of Canadians Against Suicide Bombing. In Canada, he's the vice president of the Council of Muslims Facing Tomorrow, a group championing freedom, human rights, and gender equality in the Muslim world and Canadian Muslim community. Now, as I was saying at the beginning of this, you'd think you could turn those strengths into strengths when mud is slung by liberals. When they say he's an Islamophobist, you say actually he's a Muslim himself, and he's on all sorts of groups. He's on the Council of Muslims Facing Tomorrow, and they champion freedom, human rights, and gender equality. Mr. Liberal, didn't you know that? And then you use that as a strength. Mr. Scheer, did you not read that memo in Mr. Salim's political science course? No? Did you miss that one? Anyway, I find it interesting, right? You can't make a person who has testified before Congress, testified before our government, is well known in these circles. You can't turn that into a strength. You're worried that the liberals are going to turn his writing against him, and you think that there's nothing to fight against? There's nothing in Mr. Mansur's history that can bolster his image? You think that's going to tank your national campaign, Mr. Scheer? Really? I think that's incredible. This calculation seems about as well thought out as the idea to remove Mr. Cooper from the Justice Committee after he so egregiously spoke words that were online hate at the online hate speech Justice Committee meeting. How dare he, right? And how dare he speak those words of hate to a Muslim witness? This is interesting. I think I will encourage you to look up Mr. Tom Quiggin, because he says that the Conservative Party is just as infiltrated as the Liberal Party when it comes to radical Islam. And radical Islam is different than somebody who is a Muslim, in my opinion. But radical Islam is a big problem, and there are a lot of groups, ISIS, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, just off the top of my head, that follow that ideology. And that ideology is very frightening in our Western democracy, especially a Western democracy that falls all over itself to be inclusive to absolutely everybody, to its detriment. It is interesting to watch the leader of the Conservative Party behave in this way. Is this a conservative party or is this a globalist party? Looks like, to me, a globalist party. Mr. Scheer looks like, to me, what Theresa May was to the United Kingdom. Do we want to waste 4 years? Because that's what it looks like we'd be doing. Mr. Scheer's behavior and actions show somebody who is not willing to take a stand, even with somebody with the pedigree of Mr. Mansur. I'm sorry if I've got your name wrong, sir. I'm not sure if I do. I think it's right. It sounds right to me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Mr. Bernier is not afraid to be called names. Mr. Bernier is not afraid to take a position on things, regardless of whether you like it or not. And you don't have to vote for it, but he at least takes a position. Thanks for watching. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.